Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope your day is going beautiful. I hope that a miracle happens to you today. I hope that thing you're wishing for, boom, just happens right in your life. I hope you got to wake up in the arms of the person you love. I hope the sun is shining. I hope the birds are singing. I hope the wind is at your back. I got an incredible guest, an incredible show for you today. James Wilson. He's a pioneering guide for entrepreneurs, which is great for this audience, integrating life and soul purpose into successful business through a life of lived experience and human design insights. He empowers individuals to chart their own course, he actually has a human design course where he's offering a 90-day self-exploration roadmap for personal and professional development. With a focus on conscious embodying awakening, James fosters mutuality and trust in one's internal wisdom. His diverse background includes military service, certification in transcendental meditation, and academic achievements in information technology, consciousness, and human potential. James is dedicated to inspiring authenticity and purpose in others, envisioning a world grounded in love, honesty, and community support. Man, that sounds so amazing. James, thanks for being here today, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a real, it's a real pleasure to be here with you, and that's a great introduction.
Yeah, well, there's so much I left out of that introduction. You have a really illustrious background, and you've done some really cool things before you got to this table and we're talking to me today. And I kind of wanted to throw it back to you a little bit. I know that you've done some work over at NASA and you've had a very interesting military service career, but maybe you could kind of fill in some gaps about who you were before you became who you are today.
A great way to phrase it in terms of who I was, because there seemed to be like a clear demarcation point as far as a previous version of myself, and then a profound yet very difficult, uncomfortable, tragic breakdown. I refer to it as a dark night of the whole being, as opposed to dark night of the soul, because it was more than that. It was more than just my soul. It's like my whole life, everything just kind of seemed to fall apart, but it seemed necessary to be the awakening into the awakened path that I'm on now. So in some ways, I lose track of what I did previously. So when I hear some of my track record of things I did, it's like almost hearing somebody else's life story, like who did that? The best way I can put that into context is like that particular path that I was on, say I'd say the first 30 years of life. For topical purposes, maybe if we lead into human design, there's an astrological component to it. There seemed to be some factor of a Saturn return or some initiatic experience of turning 30. Doesn't seem like that big a deal now, but it was like, oh my God, my life is changing dramatically. Up until that point, till around 30, I was on the trajectory of like everything looked good on the outside as far as achievement and success. It was a very linear path of like, okay, I graduate high school. What am I supposed to do now? At that time, the only options available were really go to college, get a job, or join the military. And so I joined the military. I joined the Air Force. I was a weather forecaster. I've always had a fascination for patterns, being able to see patterns within something, predicting the future. And I found a love for that in weather forecasting. That brought me to working with NASA, getting to experience that. So, I mean, it was like this crescendo of reaching the pinnacles of success for what I thought was possible in my life. And I guess it's kind of cliche to say, but it's like getting a glimpse into celebrity or fame or real success and getting there at this like supposed arrival point. And then internally, it was kind of there was a real dichotomy. Like I wasn't happy, So I got out of the military, and that's a complete paradigm shift of its own world. Then getting out into the civilian world, it's just uncharted territory. It's like, I'm a civilian now. I'm trying to understand how to navigate this life. And so I still found I guess that about 10 years ago is when I got set on a course of the traditional spiritual seeker. Searching for truth,
Yeah.
spiritual seeking. Currently, that also seems very old paradigm to me as far as how that started out versus how it is now. Started out with looking to outer authority figures, specifically gurus, teachers, someone that could tell me what that meant. Like what did all these and seemingly endless questions, which I look back on retrospectively as deep spiritual insecurity.
Mm.
And whether it was in an ashram or in groups of people who had insatiable questions for the teacher or the guru, like just lining up at the microphone, like and insert
Yeah.
question about existence and spirituality. And so it's the spiritual insecurity of endless questions and needing someone to it's always seen through an illusion, even in the moment as I'm speaking, but it was a deep need for being saved. I need something or someone to save me. And so I realized, I guess in more recent years, like there's nothing or no one that can save me, because that's even kind of illusion itself. Like, because it's just deeper and deeper layers of questioning. Like, well, what do I need to be saved from? And then I, saved from what? Like death, dying. Like that's inevitable. And that led me on to another more recent, like seeking, but more around grief, death and dying type of work, of like the curiosity seemed to extend past this lifetime of like, well, what happens when you die? Is there life after life? So before we were kind of chatting about where's a good starting place or what's the beginning. I never
Yeah.
really know, like life doesn't seem to have a beginning or an end.
Right.
I can't really tell. So it brought me to human design. That's the only real, I call it like it's a paradigm that's sticky. Like it's hard to cast off. All the other ones just seem to not hold a lot of truth to them.
Why do you think that is? Like I've talked to some people about human design, and I've looked at my chart, and I found some really interesting areas for exploration that are unlike other forms of learning. But what do you think it is about human design for you that makes it so sticky? Like, is it the intricacies? Is it the way in which it seems to have a patterns in it? Like, what is it for you that, like, really, when you were studying it, looking at it, that not only attracted you to it, but made it stick for you?
Okay, I'm going to answer the first question first
Yeah.
because it didn't stick to me initially. I actually hated it at first.
Let's hear about it.
um,
Why?
but why do I gravitate towards it now? Because it's let's see, how do I say this? It's like it seems to be a continual reference point back to yourself.
Mhm.
Other teachings seem to lead people towards an agenda or following someone else. And it's the only thing I really found that's a system that continually reminds you to follow your own inner authority, your own truth. And without that, it's so easy to get lost in something. And so it's almost like the same kind of existential question of like, so sticky in terms of like, you can't escape, as far as I can tell, like the confines of your body. And if you can, through some sort of out of body experience, it's very temporary. And then you always come back in your physical form, you know?
Yeah.
So that was a letdown of spiritual seeking. I thought I was always trying to get out of here.
Right.
trying to merge with consciousness to have some out of body experience, and
Yeah.
I was continually defeated. I kept coming back here. So that is the same thing, like coming back into the body of like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to be here. There's more to do here. And so the actionable practicality I find in the chart is like it brings an answer in the moment of not so much like who am I and self-knowledge, that's kind of ongoing, but more of like what am I here to do?
Yeah. I, I hear this echo of external validation, and it does seem to me that a lot of the Western, it seems to me that a lot of Western religions are based on, like the ceramic model of the universe where, Jesus was the son of a carpenter and you as an individual follow the teachings and you make something out of nothing. The same way a carpenter makes things, so too do you go in the world and make your way. And it seems like the ceramic version of the universe where you as an individual, you go out there and you make this thing kind of happen. And it just seems like you're always, for me, and a lot of these religions, it seems like people are seeking external validation to understand who they are. And I can see that on some level.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me that when you look at human design, it is reflecting you back to yourself. And it's a way of getting to see yourself in other things on some level. Is there an echo there, or what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. So external validation seem to be at every corner in
Right.
spiritual seeking, needing approval.
Yeah. Yep.
Approval from a teacher to validate your level
Yep.
of consciousness.
Yep.
Uh, and there was a set linear predetermined path. Like you reach this level of consciousness and it's kind of linear. And there, it didn't, yeah, it seemed to give power away, giving power away to the teacher and
Yeah.
devotional. So I don't know. That's just a good point that internal validation seems to be what's possible. I think the confusing part is that as far as collective consciousness goes and previous years, even like 10, 15 years ago, um, I, I don't know if it was even possible for individual people to be able to. This is my current
Yeah.
level of the consciousness, but that there was a need for external validation in a way that may not be as present that it is now. I don't know how else to
Yeah.
explain that, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think that, there's that old saying that says when the student is ready, the teacher will show up. And even though that sort of explains external validation, maybe human design on some level is the new teacher. And it's teaching us, it's like, okay, we're going to take off the training wheels now. You no longer need these external validations. And isn't it interesting that, you know, on some level, spiritual teachings seem to come at pivotal times in society's need for it. When you
Yeah.
look at maybe the Roman times, you see Christianity beginning to bubble to the surface, and
Hmm.
throughout, you can look back at the Eleusinian mysteries, or pick your time, and you can see these sort of spiritual movements beginning to take root and begin to unveil a new sort of path forward. And I kind of see that and get that vibe from human design. Like it's interesting to see it emerge in a time when boundaries are breaking down, borders are breaking down, governments
Yeah.
are breaking down, and synonymously, individuals are being empowered. And what better change can come from the ground up? Like that's how real movements are started. That's how real
Hmm.
change happens. And it
Hmm.
seems that it's beginning with the individual. So I would agree with that. What's your take? What do you think?
Yeah, great way to phrase it as far as things bubble up in evolution as they're needed.
Yeah.
And there were specific teachings or paradigms or individuals, whether it's a
Right.
Christ-like figure
Right.
or some savior that came about.
Right.
And when it's structure, there's a massive shift structure. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty evident to us now that the structures and systems that were even a few years ago were working for us are quickly crumbling. And then everyone's looking to the future of like what can save us, or clinging to something. I don't mean this to sound alarmist, but I don't think there's anyone coming per se to save us anymore. And that's,
Right.
I don't want to say human design. The reason that I am continually skeptical of it and don't really say it's something that's going to save people is that it's all meant to, all the teachings from the past kind of said the same thing. Like, you're your own teacher, you're your own guide. You've got to live your own life.
Right.
And so it's just the, I call human design like the last paradigm that you can cling to, which is yourself. Like, all you have is yourself, and that's all you really need, because all of the truth and all of the wisdom and everything that's meant for you, kind of, it just seems to come through you,
Yeah.
in the moment as you need it. And I think that that's what people are waking up to, is they're like, they don't need to follow external agendas and being told what to do per se, where in previous years they may have needed to kind of get people to where we are now. But yeah, I see this real shift to individuality, just as you were saying. So what's as far as what's bubbling up for us now, kind of, I don't know. I think the scary part could be nothing, and that's one of the problems, is that it's waking up to the fact that there's nothing, there's nothingness. I guess when you get to the real depths of truth, it's, you get to some void, or like there's nothing. I don't think I lose words, like, well, nothing. Nothing's coming. It's just life as it is, so living without the need for a paradigm, I suppose.
Yeah, I like that. It seems true enough that when you begin investigating any sort of subject, you learn that what you're learning is other people's opinions. And that
Yeah.
can be a letdown, especially if the more you believe in something, you start researching it and you're like, this thing doesn't really make that much sense to me. Maybe it's me. But then you just dig down deeper and deeper. And then you realize, and I think it's both magic and tragic. Like the deeper you dig into something, the more you realize that the lessons you're learning from them are the meaning you give to them. That's different than somebody else's ideas. It's different than reading a book about, I don't know, pick your subject, like if it's English or, archaeology or any of these subjects. They're really just other people's opinions of what happened. And the real discoveries happen when you as an individual decide to walk down that path and start looking for things. And
Right.
I think human design definitely reflects that back to you when you start going in and looking at, oh, well, what does this gate and this relationship mean? And that's another point too, is it's really heavy on relationships. Like, what does this gate mean to this thing? Like, you really, regardless of which one you're investigating, you're definitely investigating relationships, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm wondering when you first learned about human design, and what's your relationship to that?
So my introduction to human design was this year, like a few months ago. I had a friend of mine reach out to me, and he just went briefly over a chart, and then I had another friend of mine do something similar. So maybe I have an hour, 2 hours tops of just talking to people about it. So I don't really know that much. I know that I forgot the gentleman's name that kind of started it back in the 90s or the 80s or something like that. Maybe give us a background on it. What do you know?
Okay, it's highly debated as far as the
Okay.
historical context, but I'd be
Okay.
happy to.
Please.
So it started in 1987.
All right.
It's pretty recent. I guess the metaphysical side of it is that, as the story goes, in 1987 there was a supernova explosion of like a giant star in the universe that exploded. And apparently when that happens, there's a massive neutrino storm. It's like these quantum particles of neutrinos, which are like they bombard the planet with intelligence.
Mm.
And it's a time of a massive awakening for individual people who are open to receive intelligence from the universe that come from massive star explosions. It's weird to me to even say that, but that's the story.
Okay.
So the gentleman that you mentioned, his name's Ra Uru Hu. That was his pseudonym. His given name was Alan Krakow. It's a really fascinating story because he claims to, he claims to be the custodian or the facilitator of the human design system, but he admittedly says he was in like a complete psychological breakdown, kind of going through a period of madness. He just locked himself away in a hut in Ibiza, Spain. And it was around this time in 1987. And, he was just like kind of done with society and everything. And then he refers to it as the voice that came to him. And over a couple of days, he was kind of in this feverish haze of illusions and seeing things. People say LSD might have been involved. I wouldn't be surprised. It could have been a combination of LSD or some psychological experience or a psychedelic experience in conjunction with perhaps this galactic phenomenon at the time. And it was dictated to him by this voice. People can go on YouTube and it's like type in human design, Ra Uru Hu, the voice, and he'll tell this story of how the term I use is cognize. If you go back to the ancient traditions in Vedic traditions, the ancient rishis would use that term cognizing as nature speaking through them. And so that's how I relate to what Ra experienced in the 80s was a cognition from nature. And and he was told that he would bring the human design system out to the world. He wrestled with it for a while. So 1992 seems to be more of the time when he actually brought it out in a more formal capacity and started doing lectures on it. And I was born in 1987, so
perfect. Imagine that.
Coincidence, perhaps. Yeah. That's when I arrived, maybe on that neutrino stream.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's not necessarily like human design started in 1987. It's more like that's when it was brought to humanity to learn about.
Right.
Because it can be traced back even further. I don't get lost in it too much, but so 1776 seems like a significant milestone in human design history to map to humanity, because that was the most recent shift that seems relevant to me was modern democracy. Of a shift away from totalitarianism into this is, I'll get esoteric.
Yeah,
but
let's do it.
There was a split in the human design chart because it also maps and mirrors evolution. So the human design system evolves as humans evolve. It's not necessarily a static system, but 1771 was a split in the human design chart. And there's a split supposedly in 2027 coming up pretty soon. That's why I say that. So there's a kind of a prophecy within human design that we're coming to the end of a 400-year illusion, basically, and it's the end of truth.
Wow. What does that mean? Like, does that just means that? Let me say this. There's a great book called The Anti-Hero's Journey by Doc Askins, and in that book, he asks the question: are we outgrowing the hero's journey? And if you look at the hero's journey as sort of a foundational myth on which most people's lives seem to be drawn to. You look at Star Wars, or pick your hero's journeys, whether it's Odysseus or Star Wars or the underdog. It's all has like this sort of this sort of hero's journey to it. But maybe that is sort of a predetermined path. Like maybe that is naive in some ways. And I think even Doc Askins uses that word, like it's naive. Like, what is truth? Like, my truth is different than your truth. And what happened in World War II? It depends on which person you ask. When we start talking about what truth is, it starts getting really murky really quick. And
Yeah.
truth seems to be a way in which I can pull out my biggest bomb and kill you. Like that seems to be the found. Well, whose truth is bigger? The guy with the biggest weapon. That guy has the best truth.
Right.
I'm not. And so maybe on some level we are beginning to have the scales pulled from our eyes, because truth is, man, it's like a weasel word. It's like we're going to get behind this thing and hide behind it. What's your take on? Maybe you could tell me more about this split, your ideas about truth, and like what do you think may happen if there's a split in truth in 2027?
Sure. So you used the term training wheels before.
Yeah.
And the training wheels were to give us some hope, perhaps, that there was an objective truth out there for us. And upon investigation, it's like there doesn't seem to be an objective truth, because, like you said, it's always going to be in debate as far as whose truth is more truthful.
That should be a bumper sticker.
It's actually borrowed from Ken Wilber, if you're familiar with him. So integral theory from Ken Wilber and human design are kind of the two things that I personally cling to as far as old truths. Like, okay. So he basically devoted. It sounds like you're familiar with Ken Wilber.
A little bit.
He devoted his whole life to truth seeking in the most profound sense, where it's just every religion, every teaching, everything, every concept he could come up with. He was trying to find, like, what's the through thread for this? And his conclusion from that was, it's all truth in some capacity, but some truths are more truthful than other truths. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to think about that for like 10 years.
Yeah.
But so the training wheels were like to give us collective hope to keep driving the species forward, because we're just truth seekers in the sense that are like, it's like our minds want to know what truth is. So there was always kind of this internal bifurcation in the human experience, it seems like, of your mind wanting to know truth in some way. And it can't. It's like a unanswerable question. I don't think that your mind is really built, or we haven't evolved to the point where our minds can grasp what truth is. So it's taking off those training wheels to seduce us to stop looking for truth from our minds, per se, because it only ends in whose truth is better. It's always some. So that's why I encourage people to enter into the field of a new field of awakening, which I call the field of mutuality, which is moving away from or outgrowing the polarity of needing to be superior or inferior, or for your truth to be better than someone else's, because that doesn't matter. It just ends in the same old problems. I don't know how else to answer that, but maybe knowingness, inner knowingness, is the replacement for the addiction to seeking truth from the mind.
Wow, the addiction to seeking truth, like that is. And for me, when I hear that, gosh, I've never heard that. First off, thanks. I never heard that. The addiction to seeking truth. It seems like such a small-mindedness and a rat race. I think of but then again, I think of the infinity sign. Not that it's infinite, but that it's an infinite loop. Like you just, you're seeking truth, and then it comes down here, and then you're seeking truth, and it's like the truth leads to curiosity, leads to truth, leads to curiosity. And it's just like this wave going back and forth. It's like, hey, enough of the addiction to seeking truth. Okay, let me just stop. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So the infinity symbol, and realizing that it's always just going to lead you perpetually back to the same place.
That's so crazy.
And so you could maybe, to use the infinity symbol as an example, perhaps that is the training wheels that we've already had. Of there's a fear to let go of what we knew from the past, and that was to stay on the hamster wheel. And what does it look like if you're off the hamster wheel? And is that even possible? Probably not, but
why it sounds like maybe your dark night of being is the first step off the hamster wheel. I myself have had, like, I know so many people in this conversation that have made some really big changes in their life. Some of those changes are made for them. Maybe instead of quitting a job, you're escorted off the property, and like, but I think that these changes provide these profound changes that are happening to people and probably have for quite some time are sort of an invitation to come off of the hamster wheel. What do you think?
Yeah, invitation would be a nice, gentle way to put it.
You're right. It's not.
Where when I let go, I let in those awakening experiences or some deep shift,
Yeah.
being invited to go off the hamster wheel. I wanted to stay on it. I wanted to
Yep.
continue to be on the traditional paths of seeking. And so I have adopted more of the phrase of cooperating with life and what life
that.
wants for me. Otherwise, I would get
Yep.
prodded off of the hamster wheel, So it was involuntary. If the choice, you've heard the term the choiceless choice.
I have
I was going when I was in pure traditional seeker mode of like, I'm gonna go to the ashram, I'm gonna meditate, and I just need to meditate more. And I was going for flashy enlightenment.
Nice.
I very much wanted that. But life, I cooperated with what life wanted for me. And it led me to complete unknowingness, And it's terrifying most of the time of like, oh God, I want to know. I want to cling to knowing.
Yeah.
But I find it the most liberating on a day-to-day basis to genuinely go, I have no idea about anything. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yep.
And I don't really care. I mean, I do. There's always that side of it where it's like, I plan. I guess that's where I still cling to human design, honestly, for some internal truth is like these reminders of my particular life path, which that's what's cool about everyone's chart. You cannot have a chart that's the same as anybody else's. So if anything, it's all you have as a navigation tool. My particular life path, which is if people are listening and referencing their chart, it comes through in your incarnation cross, which is the plot line of your life story. That's the stickiest one because it's like it's going to happen whether you want it to or not, seemingly. Like the anyways, mine happens to be the cross of the unexpected. It's like something it was just imprinted in my DNA that my life is going to be inherently unpredictable, unexpected, not to know what the hell is going to happen, which may not be true for you, may not be true for somebody else. Their life could be a little bit more predetermined. Their life is like they know what's going to happen. Mine doesn't seem to be. No idea. I just go with it. Do you happen to remember any of the specifics of your chart, like incarnation cross or anything?
I know that like I'm a 5-1, and I don't remember the specifics of it. It's so in depth, and the more that I listened to what they were saying about the relationship between this and that, then I forgot like the other parts. You know what I mean? I was like, oh yeah, that's totally true. But I do remember really resonating with the way in which it was described to me, and they were saying things that were really, they hit home to me. Like I almost cried a few times. I was like, dude, that is so me. Like that, really resonated with me. And I was blown away by the ability of a total stranger to look at this sheet of paper and say things to me that was just.
That's why it was weird to me at first when it's like a stranger who was reading my chart who I'd never met before seemed to know me better than I knew myself. I was like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
It was weird. And so it took me a while, but sure, even that alone, 5-1, that's the profile. So like you're 5-1. Do you remember your authority? If it's your decision-making process, so you're 5-1 splenic authority, sacral, or your generator.
I think it's it's sacral, and I think what's the most common one? A generator?
Yeah, technically generator, manifesting generator, perhaps.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's, in the way it was read to me, like they were just saying things about the way I perceive people and like my ability to, one of the things in there that really hit home was and this probably is true for other people too, but like you do so much more for other people than you would ever do for yourself. And on top of that, I have like I really want to know what other people are thinking. And so I spend a lot of time doing like I do a podcast where I'm constantly interviewing people and trying to figure out like why they're saying the things they're saying. And I listen to like the metaphors they use. And that was part of the last reading that I got was I have a really unique way of helping people with a message that they want to get out and then reflecting it back to them. And I've had so many people tell me that at the podcast, like, you know what, you just never thought about it like that. And so after they had read that to me, I was like, it just hit home. It made sense. I was like, that's exactly how I think. Like, how do you know that? Like, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. Okay. And so what's your relationship to this concept of a projection field? If you know what I mean.
I had a problem with projection. Like I would project all my fears and all my things on other people. You know, I didn't really realize that until a few years ago. Like in much like you, I was just prodded off the hamster wheel. Like I was a UPS driver for 26 years and I just got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I started speaking out and I took like this really hard line and it was like I couldn't do it. Like I physically couldn't do it. And the more that I went to work, like I would almost get sick being there. You know, and I was like, my whole life was just dying. And I was making tons of money. We were doing really well. And I was like, I just can't do it. And like, what are you talking about? You can't do it. Like I just there's something bigger than me telling me to leave. Like I have to leave here. People are like, you're out of your mind, George. You know, and I'm like, what do you do with your family? What do you do with your house? Like you're just gonna get a second on your house and do this podcasting thing? I'm like, yep. People are like, you're fucking out of your mind. Man, what are you going to do? I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. Like, that's not going to work. And I'm like, why wouldn't it work? And they're like, what do you mean? Why wouldn't it work? And I'm like, that's the question. Like, why wouldn't it work? I don't understand what you guys are saying. And so like, it was my prod. It was like, and I can hear it, you know, I hear it in the environment around me, through the plants, through nature, through my environment, through my relationships. Like I can't do anything else, almost like an obsession. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm just being guided this way. And it is scary because you don't know what's going to happen. Like I have no idea how on some level I'm going to make it, you know, financially, creatively, relationship wise. But I know that if I don't follow this path, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. And there's too much pain there. Like there's a force bigger than me guiding me. And that's both scary, but it also gives me faith. Like, look, I'm following the path I'm supposed to be on. And when people are like, how do you know? I'm like, I just do. I just do. Yeah. It's crazy, right?
Yeah. Great example of, I would say, mutual validation in terms of it's obviously a different path, but like that seems to be how the hero's journey played through for me as well. It's like it's a choice of a lesser pain. Like, do I follow this call of what I'm supposed to do? It sounds like you did that as well. Like there's just a departure from conventional life that was prodding you, and you just go with it. And it's completely unknown, but it's way more. I don't know. How's it working out for you?
It's like a tale of two cities. It's the best of times. It's the worst of times, you know? And I wouldn't have it any other way though. Like when I look back, and similar to you, when I look back at what I used to do, I'm so thankful I don't do it anymore. Like I'm so thankful, even though I have no idea of what tomorrow brings. I know that I was dying doing what I was doing. Yeah. I know that my relationships, like you would think on some level, maybe your relationships with Falter might have gotten incredibly more clear, incredibly more wonderful, incredibly more close. I learned so much more about myself. I think on some level, when you're pretending, when you're going out and doing these things, you're allowed to lie to yourself. But when you remove the safety net, you have to get real clear on who you are. You have to get real clear on what your problems are. You have to get real clear on being honest with yourself. And I think that that's something that can really only come from uncertainty. And like that's while uncertainty can be frightening, it's also a very good gift because you have to have faith in yourself, which kind of takes us back to human design. There's no external validation. If you're looking for it in this position, you're not going to find it because everyone's going to tell you you're crazy. Everyone's going to tell you you can't do it. the validation comes from in here. It's that
Yeah.
it's that it's the silence in between your heartbeats that gives you the courage to take the next step forward. It's
Right.
the, it's there. It's the knowing, man. It's there.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And that certainly comes through in your message. Like just when I first learned about what you're doing in your podcast, and I jumped in the car, and you have like a quick kind of intro.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was like the most inspiring thing. It was like, your life matters. You're amazing. You can do it. And I hear that stuff, all the time, but this
Right.
just felt so truthful coming from your heart. And I was like, this guy is not bullshitting people, because you can tell the difference nowadays. It's like, be your true authentic self and be
Right.
genuine and reach your full potential. It's like blah, blah, blah. I've heard that a million times. But when it's really coming from somebody's heart, it's like, it's infectious, And so, yeah, hats off to you for following that. I know it's not easy.
Well, maybe the word mutuality, like I've never really heard that before. And as I was reading through your bio a little bit, and you brought it up real briefly, man, I would love to dig into that. Can you tell me what it is, how you came up with it, and just maybe we can dig into that a little bit?
I wish I could claim the concept for my own. So I don't really nowadays don't refer to having a teacher per se, because I teach myself things, but I can't take credit for it, because then that's like, I get into hubris and like these are my concepts or my teachings or whatever. So I guess the closest thing I have is like osmosis, like people that I trust, especially if they're wise. I trust life experience.
Yes.
People who are old, wise elders, and they've been through it. They're not trying to bullshit people anymore, So it's not, mutuality is something that I learned. How did I learn it? How do I say this? Okay, so the traditional path that I started on was becoming a teacher of transcendental meditation. Are you a little familiar with that as far as how that came like to the West through Maharishi Mahesh Yogi from Rishikesh, India in the 60s?
Only briefly, man. Maybe you could help me and the audience know a little bit more about it.
Well, it gets really far away from mutuality, but let's just hold that as far as this is eventually supposed to get us to the new awakening field of mutuality. But it's how that collapsed for me that brought me involuntarily and gladly so to the concept of mutuality, out of the paradigm of seeking a guru. I wasn't really seeking a guru. I wanted to be a TM teacher. I wanted to teach meditation. I wanted to learn about it. The history, I don't know. I wasn't around at the time, but it seemed like there was this big explosion through the 50s and the 60s of I don't know, real it's like this inception point of hippies and spiritual seeking, and it came to the West from a lot of Eastern traditions, a lot of it from India. So there was a teacher or a guru. His name was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He's most commonly known for being the spiritual guide for the Beatles. I think that's when most of mainstream Westerners learned about Maharishi, transcendental meditation, and things coming out of India at that time, was when the Beatles made this weird shift from like the clean cut good old boys to Sgt. Pepper's. Yeah. Sgt. Pepper is doing LSD and just doing like really radical stuff. And they, it was like they did some spiritual meditation retreats with Maharishi at ashrams in India, and they would come back and just kind of bring this culture to the West, and people were blown away by it. And I think it started a lot of movements, spiritual movements in the 60s. So the transcendental meditation one is, how do I concisely say the history of it? It's just Maharishi was really adamant about bringing the specific technique of transcendental meditation to the West. And I think it served a really good purpose as far as people needed to learn how to quiet their mind, to actually go within, to be more self-referral. So it served a really good purpose at that time to teach a standardized type of meditation to a large amount of people globally. And he dedicated his whole life to doing that. I kind of innocently came into the middle of that in 2012 12, I had no reference for really meditation or anything spiritual whatsoever. I was very worldly. That's the time when I was working for NASA. I was a meteorologist. I was very kind of scientifically minded. But kind of like you were saying, I had this deep, painful inner calling to go find myself. Like, oh God, I got to go find myself. What does that mean? Like, I'm right here. It's stupid to think about it now. It's like trying to find myself or find my soul, especially. I was like soul seeking. It's like it's all within me. It took me a while to figure that out. But at the time, I was lost. So I was looking for an external validation. Gurus seemed to be what was hip at the time, even 10 years ago. I had one of his books that Maharishi wrote. It was called The Science and Art of Being. I had a vague concept of being, like what that, I was like, I just want to be. It seemed like life just was full of problems and conflicts that were bringing me out of a state of simply being. So I learned transcendental meditation, and then there's a whole kind of cliche story as far as it can get very exploited. I was honestly exploited, to be honest with you, as far as using my story to fit the narrative of promoting transcendental meditation in the mainstream. And it's basically like looking for veterans. Like, here, tell us your story about how going to war completely broke you and gave you post-traumatic stress, and then how we came in and taught you transcendental meditation and saved your life. And now you're a poster child. And that was great because I was still very much on the trajectory of like, I wanted to be a poster child. I wanted to be, and those days, even 10 years ago, those days, mainstream media was like the pinnacle of you wanted to get on news, the news channel. That's where people knew you. Nowadays it's podcasts, and so I could completely open that up.
Yeah.
But it was enticing. There were celebrities involved. You know, any weird spiritual movement has celebrities involved, and there's Katy Perry and all, you know, Russell Brand and Jim Carrey. There's a lot of celebrities that I respected and looked up to that were involved in this meditation movement. But I don't think this meditation movement was prepared for the massive awakening shifts, and especially social media, which kind of calls big movements out on their bullshit. Because anytime something gets too big, even if it's has the best of intentions, that's where I was very disillusioned, because I was like, this movement is completely based in world peace and enlightenment. How could it be corrupt? It's totally corrupt. Because and so again, I wanted to stay in this particular spiritual movement. I liked meditating. I liked kind of the status that I had, but I don't remember, the details are kind of hazy as far as that happened. There's usually some sort of being ostracized or outcast once you start to speak out against things. That's where it was. That's kind of where human design came in. And so you're a 5-line. I'm a 3-line. There's a lot of common ground there sometimes. So Ra Uru, who I mentioned, brought out more of like this, it's usually referred to as like a shocking kind of language to shock people awake. And so 5 lines are referred to as heretics. Not, people usually don't like to be called heretics so much, but
that's totally me.
yeah. Okay. So it's good if people self-identify with it. But so it's heretic, and then I'm a 3-line. It was martyr. So I had this deep martyr complex that actually I really kind of lived out, and I started speaking out against a lot of the bullshit that I saw. And so I found myself just kind of ostracized and blacklisted from all of the movements, whatever they were doing. And anyways, but I still had a deep trust for certain individuals who were long-term transcendental meditation teachers who were kind of on the outskirts. That's when I started to realize, like, oh, I'm more of an outsider. I was always trying to fit in. Like, I want to be like everyone else and do what they're doing. But I just kind of got pushed to like, oh, I guess I'm more of an outsider. And so there's some transcendental meditation teachers who had a similar path where it's like, it didn't work for them, or they were kicked out, or it's just, you know, their life fell apart and they were disillusioned by everything. And so they kind of formed their own teaching per se, and I just happen to know a couple of them. It's weird because it's not a teaching; it's more of like so it's a threefold path of consciousness. So consciousness is kind of one aspect of, say, meditation, is the field of consciousness and becoming more conscious and transcendent. But that's just one aspect of awakening. That's the problem I had with people who were like devotees to spirituality by itself, because there was this, you heard the term bypassing.
Mm-hmm. Like,
That rocked my world when I heard that. I was like, I didn't realize I was spiritually bypassing things, but now that you mention it, I kind of am. So then embodiment seems to be kind of the next field of awakening of, oh, I need to be more embodied, as opposed to someone who's just too spiritual and too transcendent. I just call them space cadets. Like, they're so spiritual, you can't even talk to them. There's no, it's fine. Everyone teach their own. But if someone's too spiritual, I'm like, I have no reference point because it doesn't seem very embodied. Like, conversely, you might find some folks out there who are a little bit too embodied, and maybe it's more of the, just working the 9 to 5, doing the grind. Know that that's soul crushing for them. So not a whole lot of consciousness, just embodied, kind of unconsciously embodied, walking around. So the integration of those two is conscious, embodied, awakening. And then I had this question of like, okay, I feel pretty awake, not in this like self-righteous kind of way. I'm just like, I'm more awake than I'd like to be. I'd like to kind of dumb this down a little bit. I miss the ignorance. It's hard to be awake to whatever is. So mutuality seemed to be the place that caught me in terms of just, it's what we're doing right now. We're talking about life, its discomforts, how it's hard, don't really know what's truthful, not trying to be better or worse than anyone else, just mutual together, like being able to speak through hardships and not sugarcoat it or make it different or pretend or put on a persona. And so all of that, I just put in this category of mutuality, like just speaking through your evolutionary path with another person.
how does that translate into your relationships? Like, do you think, is that like the foundation by which you create relationships? Is it like a foundation stone, mutuality, or a philosophy?
Probably. It sounds like it could be just semantics of how to word it, but relationships certainly, because that was always, I guess, in some ways what I was seeking was just interrelatedness with other people and how to relate to them, but still be myself and to see them where they really are. That's what I was getting at in terms of, so 5 lines in human designs are really kind of like the masters at seeing through projection fields. Because usually it's like the term is being a karmic mirror, where a lot of people can project their own unresolved trauma on you.
Yeah.
Right. And that can be a very good teaching tool. So people can, like, it can be reflected back to them, but they're actually just projecting that on you. And so I always, and I happen to be a projector in human design. And so I always felt like everything was a minutia of a projection field between two people. We're never actually seeing the other person as they were. So to answer your question, yeah, it's all about relationships, like being like a bond and relationship of how you connect with people, with seeing them for who they are. And yeah, relationships, like,
it seems to me that because they're, at least for me, in my experience, with the little I've known about human design, it's such a reflexive tool. Like, it allows me to do some deep thinking about the way I think. Maybe that's metacognition. But I'm curious, and for me, that has had some positive effects on my relationships. I've often found the work of Carl Jung to be attractive in that everyone you see is a mirror, like, and they're reflecting back to you your positives, your negatives. And I think that human design kind of amplifies that message for me. It's like, oh yeah, maybe if I can take a deep dive and begin to really know who I am, then I can understand not only the semantics of this conversation, but the meaning behind it. And I'm curious to what you think about that.
Okay, so you've got a good, what I call a dichotomy of a good balance between introspections. That's the one line. It's your 5-1. So one line, it wants to investigate things, very contemplative, introspective, and that's it's probably the truth-seeking element of human design. Like one line's just want to get to the bottom of things, like get to the point. What's the point, you know? And so, but finding that within yourself, like what's the truth here? Very introspective, but then always called out to so the 4, 5, and 6. There's 6 different profiles in human design. The upper trigram is more transpersonal, so there's an element to Carl Jung and transpersonal psychology, I think he speaks about.
Yeah.
So any element of 4, 5, and 6 is the dichotomy that wants to pull you out into the relationship realm, to higher extroversion, to then integrate that what you've introspected upon through the 5-line dynamic of so visionary leader is the term I like to use more than heretic. Because heretic's like the other side of the coin. But just to be a visionary leader. So as people usually relate to that concept a little bit more of an introspective visionary leader is how I would describe a 5-1. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to be the leader. Like I've never. I agree with the philosophy. Like those people that want to be in charge should be the people that are never allowed to be in charge. You know, and like I find myself reluctant at times. You know, to if no one else will do it, then I'll do it. You know, but I don't. I'm not like the first in line to be like, let me go do this. I'm like, dude, that's not for me. He's like, you know how to do it, and I'm like, there's way too much there, man. I'm not gonna get involved in that. But then if I have to, all right, let's go. I'll show you that. So it's interesting.
Exactly. That's why I love seeing human design as like something in real time. Like I don't like to tell people like, oh, you're this or you're that or whatever. I just like to hear what people say and then kind of go, yeah, that's what I hear a lot of 5-lines saying. I call it the reluctant Messiah complex. There's a book there's a book called The Reluctant Messiah, and it's like, of course, any good natural leader would intelligently and rightfully so have a complete aversion to wanting to be a leader, because most examples of leaders out there, as far as people in positions of leadership, are completely incompetent.
It's so true. It's so true.
Elected officials or politicians or whatever. Right. It's like, so that's kind of an unfortunate place we're in right now, is that all the true leaders don't want to be leaders. But being your own leader in your own way, like through your own voice, is what you're doing. And another part of mutuality, I don't know if it's mutuality, but like that door is opening quickly, like to be able to lead in the way that you want to and not have to fit yourself into a box of whatever traditional leadership is.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of. I was talking to some people that I found to be really interesting, and there seems to be this motif going around right now about building online or building something in front of everyone and showing people where you fail and being honest with your situation. And that to me is a new way of leadership. At least to me, I've never known that before. And I've totally embraced that. Like, I'm going to lay out all my cards right here. Like, here's how I'm doing it. Anybody could do what I'm doing. Here's the exact path. Here's where I'm failing. Here's where I'm pulling my hair out. Like, here's me crying, like I'm losing it, but like, here I am. And I think this is the best way, because I honestly believe the way we move forward is for each individual to become the best version of themselves. And everybody I talk to on the podcast is doing something cool and new and finding this way. And in doing so, I'm getting to learn. And like, that seems to be the way to be the leader, is to lead by example. Whatever you're going to do, if you're listening to this, like whatever you're doing, just do it wholeheartedly, because people are watching. And when they are watching, they're learning. And when they're learning, you are being the leader. You're helping the world get better by being the best version of yourself. So I think it's a new way to lead, right? Like it seems like we're all coming to this idea that no one's coming to save you. You can stick at this place as long as you want to, but ultimately that's your decision. All the decisions you're making and have made, they've led you to where you are, man.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you started the podcast in 2019 from what I remember. What's that? What is that leading you? Like, what have you found so far on that path of self-leadership and being yourself? And what does that look like?
It's been amazing. I started off just talking to myself, like on a YouTube channel, and just like, no one's ever going to listen to this. Everyone laugh at me. And like, dude, we start a YouTube channel. You're going to be this guy,
Yeah.
But I just laughed. I'm like, yeah, why not? I like learning, and this helps me learn. And I think I can do this, and, and it started off just me talking to myself and doing some funny stuff. And, about a year goes by and I did some book reviews. Like, I love books. I'm like, why not do some cool book reviews, and do some book reviews, and got to teach people. And some of my friends would listen to it. And then about a year and a half in, I got approached by a PR firm that was like, hey, we've noticed that you have this podcast thing you're doing and this channel, and we were wondering if you want to talk to some of our authors. And I'm like, absolutely. And it turns out some of their authors were, New York Times columnists and Ivy League teachers. And all of a sudden I went from some guy talking about magnets, whipping around a bunch of magnets on a YouTube video, to interviewing some incredible doctors that were talking about spirit and, the art of communication, and just all this cool stuff that I was fascinated by. And then all of a sudden it led into me, instead of having to send out 100 invitations to get one guest, all of a sudden people were, hey, George, can I come and talk to you? I was like, yeah. And all of a sudden people started accepting my stuff. And my whole mind everything just shifted, like, oh, relationships are the new currency. And I would say that has been the message that this whole thing has taught me so far.
Yeah.
Is that I was worried about money. I was worried about how I'm going to make a living. And now what I'm beginning to understand is that relationships are the real currency. The relationship with yourself, the relationship with other people. The fact that you and I are talking about relationships in the world of human design, like relationships is what makes you rich in life. And it's not on a monetary sense. It's in a knowing sense, knowing yourself the way you know other people, and how much better I am at having relationships with my family and figuring out what's important so that I can teach the lessons to my daughter. And, so it's been this unexpected page turner of a book where I can't wait to get to the next page and see what's going to happen. Thanks for letting me share that, man.
Oh, of course. It's inspiring to hear, because like the messages seem to get channeled through each individual person the same way, but there's like some through threads where it's like, oh yeah, I've been hearing a similar thing as far as how to move forward into this new paradigm of life. And relationships is like the most common thing that comes through for me, where I'm like, oh man, I was honestly averse to relationships, because I had such a limited understanding of what relationships were. I was just because it's just one particular word of a relationship, but it encompasses so many things. But I always just related it to like the traditional, like intimate relationship or a partnership, or whatever. But it's so much. It's like your relationship towards yourself, what you're doing, and it's important.
What are some? So you have noticed the Ariadne thread of relationships running through the tapestry. Are there some other threads or some other things that you see kind of running through this tapestry?
The Trinity. The Trinity, as far as pattern recognition at its deepest layer. So you and I are both one lines in human design. It's like analyzing the things that nobody bothers to look at.
Totally.
It's the investigator, like the researcher. What's what's the foundation. It's all foundational. So there's always this repeating pattern of a trinity. I call it the a triadox. I investigated a paradox because the paradox, the concept of a paradox was driving me crazy for so many years because everything just seemed to lead to an unresolvable paradox of two things, right? Actually, I remember in your LinkedIn bio, there was you and I together.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, oh, he'll probably be able to jive on Trinity, triadox, the relation, the three dynamics between you, me, and the other person. And it's really about the synergies, kind of a overused term, but it's like the interrelatedness or the dynamic between two people. That's this emergent, transcendent third property. I just call it a triadox, meaning that it's the wrestling between a paradox that's like two things that are seemingly unmergeable. I call it two unresolvable truths. And I guess that's where truth seeking kind of ends, in terms of you kind of reach its obvious conclusion is that when you get to a true paradox, you heard that anecdote, like a paradox is the truth standing on its head trying to get attention. You heard that?
I have now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So you get to this paradox, and it's really frustrating because you're like, there's these two seemingly unresolvable things, but it's like the bottom drops out, and then there's more one-line stuff to investigate, and it's like, oh, this is a triadox or a trinity. So there's always some revelation of a third component. You mentioned Jesus and Christ, and I'm not particularly religious, but it's weird how biblical things can get sometimes. My current investigation, or what I'm fascinated by, is like kind of honestly the paradox of the female experience, or more of the yin, of what I can't comprehend, like what I can't conceive of, that I'll probably never know truthfully. And so there's, like, you and I probably know the hero's journey pretty well, because it's like the traditional male archetype is like, I've heard that a million times. It's every story. There's that through thread. It's kind of boring. Sure, there's a call to answer, and you find guides, and there's a threshold and guardians and whatever.
Yeah.
But honestly, like the biblical, so there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the emergent Trinity of the biblical stories. For more of the yin archetype of that, it seems to be Mary and her child. And you go, well, that's only two aspects of it, but it's really about the third element is her relationship with the child. And I find that really fascinating. Like, what does that mean? Like, your relationship, like that's its own entity. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And I see, now that you bring it up, I see the triadox in a lot of therapy. I talked to a lot of people about psychedelics, and a lot of the people that have been on the podcast have been people with PTSD or addiction or some sort of truth and the relationship to it. And it's interesting because for me, I've had my own problems with like being abused as a kid and just not feeling like I wasn't enough. And, you know, when I had my son had passed away in 2011. And so like I had these situations I didn't want to face, but through psychedelics, like it's almost as if you're given the triadox, because in the beginning, there's just 2 points. There's you and this thing, and you don't want to face it. But psychedelics on some level has allowed me a third person perspective. What I would almost call that a trinity, because you can see it from the pain version and you can see it from your version. But when you can see it from a different perspective, that's when you can integrate it. Like, there can be no integration without that perspective shift. And that perspective shift is the relationship. It's the relationship between Mary and child, understanding the relationship between it. You know, if you don't take time to understand the relationship, there's pain, There's addiction, because addiction is not facing something. Addiction is running away from something and coming back and staring at it.
Right.
But the relationship is integration. Like, oh, this wasn't my fault. Oh, I didn't know that happened. Oh, I'm okay with that. Why? That's silly, you know? Or like, and there's something that shifts inside of you. You know, maybe they should call it a relation shift.
Ooh,
It's a relationship.
That's a good term. Relation shift.
Yeah, I think there's something there. But that I as soon as you said triadox, I was like, yeah, there's a third. It's almost like the concept of the watcher. You know, like you are the person observing. That you take it to Schrodinger's cat, right? Like it's just you and the cat in the room, but you're observing it. The observation is the relationship, maybe. You know, but that triadox is really starting to get my brain moving on some stuff. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, so and it is weird how you can only conceive of things to a certain degree where it becomes like too much or too painful.
Yes,
And
yes.
there's like no seemingly way out of that other than a profound psychedelic experience. It opens doors that weren't possible otherwise. No seeming. I've tried. If it was possible, I probably would have made it happen. But you know, no amount of meditation, no amount of yoga, no amount of breath work. I understand there's ways to achieve psychedelic states like endogenously or organically, but God, I have sure tried. And very brief as far as anything from, you know, psilocybin or what have you, as far as seeing like whatever a visual experience or seeing fractals or seeing something from outside yourself, you know, whatever. I don't know. Have you had that experience of outside of a hallucinogen, of a psychedelic experience, like just organically?
I think like maybe
Glimpses of it, perhaps?
there's things that get close. Watching your child be born.
Ooh, yeah.
Being in a stadium with 50,000 people when something happens, you know, deja vu on some sense is a weird little tickle of it, you know, like there's echoes of the psychedelic experience all around us, but there's nothing. And I in my opinion, there's nothing that comes that is similar to a, you know, a large dose of a psychedelic. I mean, it's neuroplasticity in real time. You know, that's what I think is happening, especially in a difficult situation, is you're acting out because your brain is fundamentally changing neural pathways like that. It's changing the meaning of events. And that's your body freaking out, or you running around naked or something like that. That's what it looks like when your brain's changing pathways.
Yeah.
I think I don't have any evidence to support that, but yeah, there's something that happens in that experience that can allow you to see the world differently forever.
Yeah, same here. There's like a few things very far between that are just very brief glimpses of it that you would call like maybe normal waking state consciousness.
Right.
It can get so mundane sometimes. Like, my God, it's just some things are so boring. But yeah, like birth of a child, like my son being born and watching that and watching him take his first breath. It's like, wow, that was, but it lasted like a brief second.
Yeah.
You know, but it was so profound, but it was kind of like, oh, well, that's over immediately.
Yeah.
Like, I think about it all the time to this day, but
too.
it's just like, wow, I just watched the inception point of creation happen in front of my eyes and watched him take his first breath. And I was like, that's amazing.
It's a miracle. Yeah.
It's funny. It's almost the same as like a profound psychedelic experience. It's like, it's so intense. And then after you integrate it a little bit, you're kind of like, oh, well, whatever. Like, or you forget it or something. You forget how profound it was, like back to boring life. Or in a football stadium, or like in a concert when you're just kind of merged with thousands and thousands of people. And it's just being like tap into the ocean of consciousness with other people. And you're like kind of outside of yourself. And it's incredible. I can kind of induce it a little bit. Like if I fast for a couple of days and I like do intense wind sprints, like I'll sprint and just kind of get my body like really into a peak physical state, and I'll take like a freezing cold shower and I'll like close my eyes and breathe really hard, and then when I close my eyes I just kind of see darkness. But if I like if I just am really intensely like, I want to see, I know there's more there to see because I've seen it in psychedelic states. It's usually
Right.
like colors, fractals. Fractals seem to be common themes. And so they're just like very briefly in the darkness where they emerge of like these fractals. And I'm like, oh, how do I do more of that? But then the moment I try to hold on to it or make it happen more, it goes away completely. I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a waste of time. I got to do something else. And there's this, I forget who said it, but it was like Rumi or something of the more aesthetic yogis who would try and have the psychedelic experience through yoga. And then Rumi was like, yeah, or you could just pay 5 cents to take the ferry across the bridge. Something, I got that, I butchered that, but you know what I mean? It's like, or you could just do mushrooms or something and just have that experience. And it's like, I think that was part of humanity for a long time, that was actually a rite of passage of these psychedelic experience and to integrate them with shamans and elders and everything. And then just like the crackdown in the 60s of criminalizing this and making it seem like something taboo. Because even to this day, it's especially from the military experience, because they really beat it into you. It's like, if you do drugs, we're going to piss test you and we're going to kick you out of the military. So even though I've been out for a decade, I'm still like, oh, they're going to kick me out.
Yeah.
It's very stigmatized. I think that was probably an impression left on people as far as being more open to psychedelic experience. But yeah, to your point, it's like, it's quite profound, those psychedelic experience where you're able to see things like outside yourself objectively and kind of witness them for what they are.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that you can ingest part of nature and then see its perspective. You know, on some level, I think that's particularly psilocybin and a lot of different plant medicines are like exogenous neurotransmitters, you know, because you're communicating with them on some level. Like, so many things make more sense. It's almost like you're coming back to yourself by sitting down and ingesting the environment around you. You know, like, you have really profound insights. Like, a while back, I was thinking to myself, like, when you think about plant medicine or vegetables or the food that's grown in your community, and I don't have a study for this, but it seems obvious to me that the food that's grown in your community is more suited to you as an individual than food that's brought from 1,000 miles away. I'm not saying that you can't get a banana from Costa Rica and Canada in the middle of winter and have it not be healthy, but the food that's particularly grown in your environment is grown in the soil. It's part of the environment the same way you are. So if you're sick, the medicine grown in your garden is going to be more effective than a plant that's brought in from a different place. Now, if you don't have those resources, of course you want the medicine or whatever, but you know, what does that mean for supply chains? What does that mean for the world around us when we're just in diet in general? Like, no wonder so many people are sick. We have decided that we're going to give up the environment around us for the illusion and perspective health from someone millions of miles away. Like, we're so disconnected. And this gets back to your idea of meditating versus taking the ferry. In some ways, that's like science. Like, we have decided, like, hey, let's try to have this experience without the plant medicine. Okay. Isn't that kind of what science is doing? Like, science is trying to prove the efficacy of medicine and take away all the subjective results. Like, you know, let's try it. And I don't know. I'm kind of bird walking here, but let me just throw this last point at you. Like, doesn't it seem that the only thing technology is doing is proving what we already know? Like, hey, man, look at this chat GPT, man. Yeah, it's just telling us the collective unconscious. Like, if you just sit back in peace, you can kind of get a vibe of what people are saying. Or like, hey, man, in the future, we're going to put brain chips in here and you're going to know what that person feels. I already know what that person feels. Like, that girl, my wife finds me attractive. I can see her face get flushed when she talks to me. Or this person doesn't like me. I can see his fist ball up, you know? Or you sit next to someone, you're like, there's something weird about this person. I'm going to get the hell out of here. Like, we already know this. It's just that people are trying to like trick you. Be like, hey, get this technology and you'll know for sure. I already know, man.
I know exactly what you mean. I know what you're getting at, or finding the words for is like, and I tend to work with people who like have a lot of, you know, spiritual gifts or natural ability or psychic abilities, to be able to like mind read or intuitively sense things on a collective level or channeling. I find it really fascinating, but it does kind of seem like, no offense to them, it's an amazing gift, it's very much needed, but like an old school version of doing it, or something that's going to take us a long time to evolve to be able to do. Probably, again, I think there was the capacity to do it in ancient civilization, and we just lost it or something.
Right.
But same thing, whether it's AI or some sort of technology, or what's the Elon Musk one, Neuralink.
Right.
I think we already have like the primitive kind of ability to mind meld and read other people's minds, because nonverbal communications like 90%. That seems true. It's like you don't really, kind of pick up vibes on people or whatever. And so I heard social media, I think, is just kind of bringing it up to the forefront as far as like, I already kind of, before social media at all, it's like it was the social contract or whatever. It's like, or trying to intuit the current state or the zeitgeist of the collective unconscious, like the state of the union, or how things were, where that's more like traversing into the public space. Or I heard this great analogy recently. It was like social media itself is the meditation of the collective unconscious.
That is a good one.
And so when you were speaking about that, that's what reminded me of it, is like, wow, you don't have to meditate to tap into the collective unconscious. It's very much, you can go on social media and people are spewing relentlessly their thoughts all the time. And it's kind of overwhelming.
It is. On some level too, here's this thing that you'll hear too, and it has to do with social media and the collective unconscious and the felt presence of the other. There's some ways, and I don't know if you have tried this, but there's these isolation tanks you can go and you can lay in, and it's like salt water and you float. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And on some level, it's that alienation that allows you to see the color red more vibrant the next time you see it, to smell the air fresher when you smell it, because you're in isolation.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think that that's what social media is doing. A lot of people say, oh, it's alleviating people from really reading body language. It's stopping people from really connecting. But on some level, maybe it's creating even a deeper connection, because you've been alienated from it. And now when you see it, you really pick up on it. Oh, I saw their eyeball twitch, or I saw their ear move, or their nostrils flare. Like, because you haven't seen it, now you're attuned to it on some level. Like before, you see it so much, it becomes callous. But now that you've been away from it, it just seems like maybe that could be happening too. We don't ever talk about that. We always talk about how isolating it is. But what effect does isolation have on your senses? It seems that it may allow them to become more sensitized, the same way neurotransmitters upregulate and downregulate. There's probably something there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So it started out that way for me, and I related to what you were saying as far as when you started out with just kind of speaking to yourself on YouTube. I think like in its earliest versions of social media, it was that way. I think it disconnected people from each other. It was isolating. It was confusing because it was so foreign to normal day-to-day interactions, which I don't think are that great. I actually hate them. I hate small talk. I was a meteorologist. When people tell me about the weather, I'm like, I don't care. I cannot small talk the weather at all. Because if I do, I just get into like, thermodynamics and things that they're like, I didn't really care about that in the first place. But so it's only been in recent years, I think probably collectively, that we're even realizing that that's possible through social media. Like, before I was doing podcasting, or I was trying to figure out how to do this in the first place, because Zoom is still a fairly new thing. Because even when there was Skype, like, who the hell used Skype? It was kind of like before we figured out what social media was, like MySpace or even Facebook in the first 10 years or something. You're like, who cares? Like, I don't want to hear about your day or whatever. So I had like what's the point of this kind of thing? And it's honestly only been the last couple of years where I realized that you could have relationships and interact with people and learn things. And there's the geographical boundaries kind of lifted too. Like, it can be able to connect with anybody on the planet, was the coolest thing. But it was so weird. Like the first time I did podcasts, or I was working with clients just purely over Zoom, it was like a new sense or ability to do that, where it took a few years to be like, it's weird to say, but like, I can interact with this person, because I was so accustomed to watching the television growing up as a kid, watching YouTube videos where it's a passive thing, and I'm just like, oh, I'm just watching this. I can't actually interact with it. But when it's on Zoom or a podcast, I'm like, I can interact with it. I can interact with the person, and like it's cool.
It is. And if you look back, you can almost see it in a linear fashion. Like it used to be that you could hear a voice through a box, and then you could see a picture in a box. And now you can hear a voice, see a picture, and interact with that one on the box. Like,
Yeah.
if it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to be like, oh, this is just the progress of it. Like, okay, well, what's next? Obviously you're going to be able to have real emotions come across through that box instead of just yelling at when I was little, my dad would yell at the TV, come on, get the ball, like he would yell at it, but no one would ever yell back. But now it's interaction. So, and it's happening faster. Why wouldn't you be able to get goosebumps talking to someone through the internet? Like, why wouldn't you be able to take it to the next level of whatever communication is? And so sometimes it's just the necessary idea to pause and look back. And it's sort of like, talk about getting high. What are people, when you get high, you have a different perspective. It's in the language, it's in the nomenclature, it's in the lexicon. Like, I've been to the mountaintop. It sounds like Martin Luther King was getting high. You know what I mean? Like he's looking down and seeing a vision of what is possible. So it's interesting.
Yeah, good point. It's like when video games first started.
Yeah.
Like that you could play Pong on the TV. You're like, I can play a video game on the TV.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the same thing with social media now. Like, oh, I can actually interact with this. And
yeah,
it's a good point. I didn't really think about the linear progression of it. It's almost like there's a real evolution to it.
Yeah. If you are a creator and you have 1,000 followers, that is very similar to an artist playing a gig at a stadium. Maybe only those, maybe they don't all tune in at the same time, and maybe throughout a month, all 1,000 followers come in and they watch your creation. Like think about the way the act of creating is evolving. Like that's the very act of creating is evolving in ways that are really fun to imagine. Like as an individual, you become the stone cast into the pond, creating ripples downstream that you may never even know. But it's, you're getting closer to seeing the ripples. I don't know. It's fascinating to think about, man.
I think about it every day. That's why I jumped full in. It sounds like you have too, to this pioneering, whatever the hell we're doing right now, but it's pretty cool.
It's amazing, man. It's mind-blowing to think that, you can simultaneously speak to the past while speaking to the future. Right now I've created something, you and I together have created something for our kids to watch while trying to think of the next word that I'm going to say. Like it's everything all at once. It's the now, man. Maybe it's the flow state, or I don't know. It's fascinating.
Good point. Way to bring in like three concepts into one. Like there's the presence of us talking. There's kind of this will be in the past once we're done, as okay, that was a podcast that was done, but there's kind of a sense of like immortality to it. Like this will live on forever in the digital space, but then it also a real sense of the future of, we don't necessarily know what the future holds. And we'll look back on this and go, remember when we used to just have to talk on Zoom, and then we'll probably be in some like augmented reality thing, like connecting with people in holograms or something. Like, I don't know about you, but I had like a real aversion to that. I was like a real Luddite for a long time. There was something about spiritual seeking and wanting to be like off the grid, where I was a total Luddite. I didn't want to. I was like, no way. And I'm always surprised at how much I'm like, what's the next thing now? But what's your sense on that as far as where things are headed, and creating, like as outside of podcasting? Are you doing creative endeavors on social media or entrepreneurially?
I've had a few people approach me for some projects, like creating a new type of platform where it's like a network, so everybody would get paid instead of on the last click. Because when you look at affiliate marketing, and for those who don't know, affiliate marketing is when James comes to me and says, George, why don't you send people to my website, and if they buy something using your coupon code, I'll give you a percentage of the sale. But this new idea is like everybody in the network gets a portion of the money that would go out to the one person. So like if you talk about it, and you can monitor how someone gets to the site. Like you can say, oh yeah, go to George's site. And even if someone goes there and they don't buy it, I can see that you sent them there, so you would get a portion of it. So I think that the speed with which technology is moving is going to fundamentally make all of us more valuable. And I think that's sort of what the opposite of what most people are saying is like, look, everyone's going to lose jobs and no one's going to be able to do anything. But I really think that technology is a liberating force. I would put myself in the EAC column, and I don't know if that makes me a bad guy or whatever, but I'm full acceleration. Like, let's just run this thing, man. Like, I think that there will be some pain, but ultimately, I think it's a liberating experience that frees us from the drudgery of living a life not worth living. I think that the opportunity for people to go out, find courage, take that first step, and I think that that's what's been going on for the last 100 years is that the people that you've admired are the first ones over the wall. Yeah, they might have got hammered, but now more and more people are coming up. And maybe that's what we spoke about earlier when we said it's getting off the hamster wheel. I think that that's what technology is trying to do. Is technology is just us. Like, hey, there's a better way, but you're gonna have to let go of this thing called certainty. You have to let go of these old ideas about the hero's journey. If you want to live a life that's meaningful, you have to have faith in yourself to do that. Like, you're a meaningful individual. You are unique. You have a gift to give. And when you start believing in yourself, that gift will begin to bloom like a flower. And it's getting people to understand that they are unique. They are beautiful. And there's a force bigger than you could possibly imagine waiting to assist you, but it has to find you working.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I had a really cool vision while you were saying that, as far as I always had this desire to get off the hamster wheel, but really it's like, and that's almost like trying to get out of the flow of life.
Right.
And really it's almost like, I don't have words for it, but the way that you articulated it was like, actually, I like the hamster wheel. It's pretty cool. I just hated the way that it seemed to stop. And like humanity got stopped or held back, or something was holding us back from kind of moving forward in the way that was most constructive for us. And now we're finding a way through. So it's almost like getting put back in the hamster wheel as opposed to getting stuck. Like, I want to go forward, but everyone seems to be getting stuck. But there's a couple of things that you said that might be good to dig into a little bit of, especially with affiliate marketing. If you've got some creative concepts around that, I want to hear about that a little bit more. And then I've heard this term EAC. I don't know what it is though. What is that?
I think it's effective accelerationism, and I can't go too into depth because I've read about it a little bit, and it seems like, in a nutshell,
is there a negative connotation to it or something?
Yes, some people are really worried about it. If you think about what recently happened with ChatGPT, where the guy that runs it, he got fired or he got cut, and everybody got rid of him. Hey, we got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah, I heard that.
I believe, and I'm sure people in the comments will shoot me straight if I'm wrong, but there's a camp called accelerationists, and they say, look, we have artificial intelligence now. Like, we almost have artificial general intelligence. Let's just run it. Like, why are we putting these governors on? And if you use ChatGPT, it only accesses information from 2 years ago, at least the 3.5 model, because the people in positions of authority are like, listen, man, this is way too dangerous. Like, someone could use a biological weapon. But then, it seems to me, and I think that this might be part of the EAC argument, is like, listen, Palantir, like governments, they've had this for a long time.
No doubt.
It seems to me that the people that are against accelerationism are the people that are holding the power. Like, we can't give this to everybody. Someone might use it for something bad. Well, what about you dummies? You dummies been using it for bad stuff this whole time. Like, and the more that I think about it, the more I start thinking, like, no wonder these people, like, when I start like looking at some of the ideas that have come out about, like, or the lack of ideas that have come out about things, like, it seems to me people in positions of authority have had access to technologies like ChatGPT for a long, long time. That's why there's been this division for so long. Like, people have this information. It's just that the people on the bottom never have. And now the people on top are like, hey, wait a minute. You guys aren't supposed to be using this stuff. This is bad. It's going to ruin the economy. No, it's not. It's just going to change the economy. It's leveling the playing field. And I think that's one of the things for EAC is that, like, look, let's level the playing field. Let's let the chips fall where they may. Here's people that are really smart that may not have could afford to go to a 4-year university. Here's someone that was a truck driver for 30 years. Let's see what this guy can do. But that's a real threat to people who are already in the power zone. And there's probably are real threats. Like, I guess on some level, you have to be honest that, someone could make a biological weapon. I would argue that someone already has, but there's lots of things that could be done, but does that mean that they will be done? I don't think so. I think humanity is primarily good people. And that if we allow them to have access to technology that can change the world, yeah, there might be some things that are dangerous, but how do you move forward without being dangerous? Like, you can't. And that's why we're stuck. That's why the hamster wheel got stuck, is because we stopped progressing. We stopped pushing the boundaries. Like, we should have faith in us, in all of us, to move the ball forward. So I'm for accelerationism. I think that we should be allowing everyone to move as fast as technology will allow us to move. And that's how we get to a better world. Like, that's how we get to a better place for everyone, is allowing everyone to participate. And that only comes from unleashing the governor on technology. Like, let's see what it can do. So I think that's just a very small ball answer of EAC. But yeah, I think that's what camp I want to be in. I want to be on the forefront. Let's let everybody try.
Yeah, that's a good reminder of, if we're just getting this technology and AI and ChatGPT now, the powers that be, who are the governors, whoever they are, the Illuminati or whatever. I investigate that all the time. It's like, who is in control here? I don't know, incompetent people who are willing to take positions of power. But as far as the governors, which is actually kind of ironic, because transcendental meditation teachers are referred to as governors, as the age of governors of the age of enlightenment. And I always hated that term. It was so elitist. I don't like elitist, of trying to be better or whatever. But yeah, power dynamics, power control, flattening the, but yeah, so for sure, like, so I had secret security clearance in the military for some of the operations that I was doing, which there's all kinds of levels of security clearance. Secret security clearance is kind of like the first echelon. There's secret security clearance. Before I got out, I was being interviewed for a job to work with Barack Obama at the White House to be the meteorologist on Air Force One. That was actually one of the downfalls for me, where I was like, wow, how did little old me, be in line for such a prestigious position to go work for the president at Camp David and be on the Air Force One crew? And like, this was all kind of set up for me. And I was like, nope, I got to go find myself. Screw that. But anyway, so I got a glimpse into the intense screening process to be able to be privy to a lot of that classified information. Yankee White was the term I remember, as far as getting screened to have Yankee White clearance, was like above top secret security clearance. And they investigate your whole family, all your friends, and it's intense. And that alone, I was like, I like my freedom. That's why I joined the military in the first place, was to have freedom.
Yeah.
I got out thinking I'd have more freedom, but I don't know. Freedom's elusive. But so yeah, even at that level of like secret security clearance and some pretty basic operations of just, there were some certain things I had to know as far as the movements of foreign dignitaries and VIPs, to be able to just give them to forecast the weather for their routes for they were flying, you know. And
Yeah.
I was like, man, if they're telling me this kind of stuff at this level, like what do I not know about? So when I hear these things about like, you know, the fact that the government is talking about aliens right now and the type of technology they might have, I'm like, okay, what do we not know, or what have they known for a long time that they haven't told
Yeah.
us about? So I haven't really heard that term EAC, but if that's the case, like I'm probably on board with that. It's like level the playing field, democratize technology, because that's probably where things stagnated and stopped the hamster wheel,
Yeah.
because it's just, there's something about a power and control that stops the flow or the inertia of life from happening the way it's, if there's a supposed to, or
Yeah.
the way that's best for collective humanity. And so yeah, I see a lot of promise in AI, because it's the same thing about like meditating on the collective unconscious. Like when you type something into chat GPT, it's almost just like speaking to collective
Yeah.
consciousness, where I'm like, yeah, I have my own individual perspective, but I never really thought about it from like every possible
Yeah.
angle, and you just kind of get like a wholeness to it. I'm like, god damn it, like that does seem right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, I think of a dam like the same way we go to a, you know, like Hoover Dam or something, like the same way we dam up a river to try to get electricity from a dam, or we try to get productivity, or we try to get power from that.
Yeah.
You know, the same way we dam up like the stream of progress. You
Hmm.
know, a waterway is like progress. A waterway is like an artery, and it flows through the states, or it flows through the environment, and it brings life to everything else. So too does the progress of technology. Technology is like a stream. When you dam it up and you don't allow it to flow its course, well, it starts breaking off in tributaries. It goes underground, and then it comes back up in certain other areas. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Like you can't, and you fundamentally change ecosystems when you create a dam. Like you just ruin every animal downstream. You ruin every ecosystem downstream because you want this electricity, and you have the hubris that you can do it better. Like that's
Hmm.
centralized power. That's governments. Like, look, we're just going to dam up technology because we're afraid of the progress. Okay, well, you can dam it up for a while, but it's going to show up over here. It's going to show up over there. And
Right.
then now you've created ecosystems that you didn't even know were a problem. You got a whole other things popping up, and you thought you had it under control. And that's when you get in trouble. Like,
Yeah.
oh, here comes Julian Assange over here.
Yeah.
Oh, here comes Tucker Carlson talking to Putin over here. You know,
Uh,
like
yeah. Yeah.
you just created more problems for yourself. So you're better off letting things flow, you know, whether it's the flow state or whether it's observing the ecosystem and how you can work with it in a way that is in relationship to yourself and those around you, man. But
Yep.
I don't know. It's amazing, man.
It's like whack-a-mole. There's just some
Yeah.
other problem pops up when you're trying to keep it like a dam. You know, you're just trying to
Right.
stop all the problems or control everything. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I always think that there was a purpose, or a meaning
Sure.
to why things were done the way they were before. What of like it was needed. It's easy to
Yeah.
look
It's
back on it and
necessary.
critique it, but I don't think that collective consciousness or humanity was ready to take the governor off
Right.
until now. I do think that time is like, okay, it's overdue. Where before it's like I think that people probably needed to be control, maybe not the best term, but it's like kind of fits into my lens of human design as far as human evolution. It's like we were just
Mm-hmm.
apes and didn't know what we were doing, so we needed cults. I think that humanity was just a big elaborate cult, because you kind of needed somebody to be the dictator. Like we needed dictators in the past in a lot of ways. to civilize people and get us to where we are now. But it's like people are pretty civilized for the most part.
Yeah.
They're waking up.
Yeah.
They're ready for that level of responsibility, I think. And so I think it's probably going to happen sooner than later. In a lot of ways, it's probably happening already. The way that most mainstream things, people just don't give it a lot of attention anymore. I don't just don't listen to it.
I think it's fractal in some ways. Like the same way you and I were speaking earlier about being prodded away from the life you were living. You know, you said, oh, I was just being prodded. When I kept going, like I kept getting pushed back. Like, you know, the same thing happened in my life. And if it's happening in your life, can you see the pattern that's happening in your community? And if you can see the pattern in your community, can you see it in society at large? Like the same way you were being kicked out of living this certain way. Like, I just want to be on this hamster wheel. It's like, nope, you can't be on it anymore. Same way I was going to this job and like, I can't do it anymore. Like the community's changing, government's changing, technology's changing. Like it's pushing us in this direction where, you know, and I like what you said, it was necessary. Like you had to go through everything that you've been through to get where you are. I had to go through everything I've been through to get where I am. So too has society had to go through all these things to get where it is. So, you know, but now we're here. Now we're at the crossroads of change, and it is changing. And there's nothing, you know, you don't have enough fingers to plug the dam. You know, you don't have, not even your fingers and your toes. You look like a monkey on there, but you're still gonna get blown away. But like, I think if you can, and here's what I do, and people may be able to apply this to their life. Look at the changes that are happening in your life. And can you see them happening in your community? And can you see them happening on a global scale? I think you can. Or you could do it the other way. Like if you're honest with yourself, take a hard look at what the changes are happening in the world and then apply that to your life. Are there similarities there? And the chances are there probably are. And like, what does that mean? Like that means you are society. That means that you are the world. Like you're part of nature. And if you want to know what's going to happen in the future, look at what's happening in your life. If you want to know what's happened in the past, look at what's happened in your life. And just to make those, it really helps make changes in your life. And it takes away the blame. It's almost back to the triadox, you know, like you can see what happened in your life. You can see what's happening in society. So now take a third person perspective and be like, okay, if I know these two things, can I tell what may happen in the future, or can I tell what may happen in the past, or can I tell a remedy? Can I find a solution by looking at these two particular entities, you know, yourself and the world, and be the bridge in between them?
Yeah, when I think of fractals, I think of specific people who are meant to travel together throughout time.
I like that. Let me elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, okay, like a family or a soul family of people that are meant to stay together, and you got separated from incarnating. And I call it the era of kind of with mutuality of the family of choice. Because there's a family that you don't choose that you're born into, and for better or worse, you know.
Yeah.
But then there also seem to be people that I feel like bonded to karmically on a soul sense, and so this term fractal keeps coming up as far as like people saying they're in my fractal, as far as like a cohesive unit that travels together, a cohort.
Yeah.
That has gotten broken up. So something happened to kind of break up fractals or whatever. And so I don't know. It's a deep calling that's always hard for me to articulate. But I've found that in odd ways through connecting with random people on social media and going to like groups and whatever, and connecting with people in kind of a spontaneous serendipitous kind of way, where like I've never met them before, but I'm like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
Like we've met before.
Yeah.
You just are naturally gravitate towards that person. So I found there's cool ways to quantify that in like connection charts in human design, because always that sense of like, whether I think you said you're married, you have a wife, or somebody that's like a best friend, you're like, I just resonate with that person. I always wanted to quantify like, why is there resonance there? Like, why do I feel attracted to this particular person. And so you can kind of quantify that in running two charts together. You're like, oh, that's where we're like naturally attracted to each other. So there's some sort of emerging kind of science and human design that I'm fascinated by, of like being able to reconnect with people in your fractal, but not in the sense of like, I call it old, like old paradigm of spirituality, of like spiritual bros or whatever, that like they hug you and they're like, embrace me, brother, for we're family. And I'm like, yo, back up. Like, you're not man, you're weird. Like, that was kind of contrived. Like, we're all one big family. It's like, I kind of felt that when I was faking it, as far as like trying to be a fake spiritual people. Like, I love everyone. And there's a Sanskrit term, it's Vasudeva, Kutumbakam, the world is my family. And that like, it resonated with me. But after I like brought back my individuality and my worldliness, I'm like, I actually hate a lot of people. I hate most people, to be honest with you. But when I'm honest with that, of like, oh, God damn it, like I love humanity, but most people I don't care for. But the people that I genuinely have relationships with, like that, those ones just deepen. You know.
I do.
So I don't know. How do you relate to that in terms of fractals and relationships? And do you have some sense of like people that you've already met up with that you were meant to, and you're like they're looking for you? It always gets weird for me to think about it that way, but.
Yeah, I think it's undeniable that there is a certain sort of relationship that's looking for you, and it may change from time to time. You know, in some ways, I think that, you know, there's some interesting literature that talks about you getting together with your soul family before coming here and making some deals. Like, look, man, you know what? I got to work on grief. I'm going to need you to come in here and do this thing, you know, or people show up at these times. And, you know, it's undeniable to meet people and feel a real kinship to them and be like, wow, you know, you want to spend more time with them. And then maybe that relationship ends in an abrupt leaving, or maybe that relationship deepens. But yeah, on some level, you know, maybe our concept of relationships and people is lacking. Maybe I can only see James in this 3-dimensional shape, but really maybe James is more than a person. Maybe he's a concept manifesting as a person, and we're melding together because we're part of the same idea, and we need each other in order to have a resonating effect as a message on a larger group of people. You know, maybe there's something a lot bigger going on, but we can only see ourselves in these weird 3-dimensional space. It's like we have on these glasses with just little poked holes in them, and you can only see a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
It's my daughter said something really funny that I don't know where she got it from, but we were looking at the stars and she's like, oh, Dad, what if they're not stars? What if they're just little holes that people poke so we can breathe? You know, like we're in like a cage or something, you know? I don't know, but like.
That's how old? You said it was your daughter?
She's 10.
10. Yeah, that sounds like something a kid would say, where you're like, how do you, what?
But I started laughing. I'm like, what are we on a prison? Because I used to catch lizards as a kid and put them in the jars, and you poke those holes so they can breathe, you know? And
that's a cool concept.
Yeah, I know, right? Like,
It does. Yeah, the idea of the universe being like all there is, that's something that I'm recently contemplating. Like, so that you can poke holes in it, and it's like there's something outside looking in at us. That's kind of ominous, but
you know, have you heard of the Saturn theory or electric universe theory that talks about, like, this is why I think like we're just beginning to understand stuff. Like, there's this thing called electric universe theory or purple dawn theory. You've heard of it?
I'm vaguely familiar with Saturn and what that means, but
imagine that.
It has any correlation to astrological components of Saturn, but no. What is it about?
So it basically says that, and there's a great, Immanuel Velikovsky wrote a series of books called Worlds in Collision, and it you know, in the 50s there was this idea that maybe the Earth used to rotate around Saturn as a brown dwarf, and we were part of our own solar system. And then we were captured by the sun in another solar system. And so you see all like there was this worlds in collision, was the sun and this solar system pulling in Saturn and its solar system. And then there was a rearrangement of the patterns around the sun. And so when you start reading the biblical text of these worldly disasters, it's because our solar system was in flux and we're becoming part of this other solar system. And Velikovsky breaks down these ideas of like, he says that, when you read the ideas about the Iliad and the Odyssey, or those texts from those particular eras, and they talk about Mars being some people say Mars is like anger. It's a what is that word called?
Maleficent.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Maleficent.
Yeah, but more like so each planet is given Mars is the god of anger. The moon was Aphrodite, and they say that, oh, Mars came to me, but like I'm not explaining it very well, but basically people should check out Manuel Velikovsky, and entertain the idea that the Earth used to be part of a solar system where Saturn was a brown dwarf and we were captured by the sun. No, now I'm kind of rambling, man, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And when you start looking at all the body of it there, like, why wouldn't it be? Like it's a really incredible theory. And I would encourage people to look at Purple Dawn theory, electric universe theory, and read Immanuel Velikovsky, come up with their own decisions about it. But yeah.
I like a good rant about trying to figure out astrology or planets or whatever. It's like, it just gets out there as far as planets being their own life form or form of intelligence, and how we evolved from that, and the configuration of the Earth. And I mean, I get lost. So I like a good rant about it, but I think it's silly to. So I always give the disclaimer that I'm not an astrologer.
Me neither. I'm a truck driver by trade.
I don't try to pretend to understand it, and that's why I like human design, because it always drags me into astrology themes, because there's components of astrology to it. But I can always kind of anchor it in the body graph. So I'm like, at least it relates to people somehow. But the moment you start talking about, it always gets into like horoscopes and whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. Or trying to find your future partner or matchmaking or something. But the most tangible thing I have, as far as like people who discount that the planets in their current arrangement, because no doubt they were arranged differently before, and who knows. But in their current arrangement, to say like Saturn or Mars doesn't have any influence on us at all, isn't that? It's kind of silly, because it's like saying the moon doesn't have any influence on us. Or there's plenty of examples of that, right? Like the tides. I think that's debatable as far as whether the moon controls the tides. At least personally, like, it impacts my sleep. I know that for sure. Like, I sleep differently based on the moon. So it's like that thing is affecting us in lots of ways.
Yeah.
So the other planets are much bigger. And so, I don't know, they seem to have something going on.
How could they not? Here's another interesting aspect of human design that I've noticed, is that I've spoken to Anja Ziebert, who is from Slovenia. And she's working on a project with human resources and human design, and finding ways to create partnerships for businesses, like depending on what it is the business is trying to accomplish. She's going and helping people build relationships. And that's what I thought of when you said you're putting up two charts of like, here's me, here's my kid, here's me, here's my wife. Like, why wouldn't that be something that people could look towards today? Even if you're going to build a business, we do disc testing, we do the Briggs-Myers. Why not have human design incorporated in there, and to see how that unfolds? Is that something that you've worked on or you're thinking about doing?
I've attempted it, because sure. I mean, when I was more in the corporate space or whatever, Myers-Briggs was a big part of it.
Sure.
Usually to put together sales teams, because they were looking for high extroversion people. So they would weed out the introverted people.
Yep.
I think that's it always seems pretty limited, or they're running into some obstacle of like holding people to that as a particular label. So I've never really been I'm optimistic that it can be, but I don't have a lot of trust currently to be able to adapt these types of advanced systems onto a corporate structure. I really encourage people who are doing it to pioneer that.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't trust I don't trust groups because I don't think that okay, I'll speak delicately here, but I always run into groupthink.
Mm.
Groupthink dynamics of how do I describe that? I don't know. It's a group losing yourself in a group, not thinking for
Sure.
yourself anymore, going along with the culture or what's typically done. And I've always found that in a corporate setting. So how human design is integrated into that, I don't know. That seems like a job for someone else because I like the conceptually. I think it's cool because it's like the seed of it seems possible in human design. So the term is called a penta.
Mm.
A penta is usually once you get past two people,
Mm.
the three or more people, is that there's an emergent dynamic that exists within the group, and the group almost takes on its own life force. And so,
Yeah.
so that's why at this point I stick to individual charts, like how to maintain your individuality without losing yourself to a collective group dynamic. That said, groups themselves, when they're really cohesive and merge together, can accomplish and create amazing things. But I've really experimented with just like my close friends and collaborators and other people who really understanding human design is kind of a elusive concept because it's like trying to understand life itself, you know. But sure, we grapple with it as far as I have like one particular friend, and we talk about just the relationship dynamic between two charts, because trying to understand a connection chart of just two charts together is like it gets very complex. So you add a third person, a fourth person. It's like any real innovator or entrepreneur. They'll talk about once you get beyond two or three people, it's just it's like it gets hard to innovate any further.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know. What do you think? I don't have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of relationships, and if you can begin to understand yourself, then you can probably begin to have better relationships with people, and maybe there's some sort of interpretation that allows you to synergize or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, it looks interesting. I've seen people hold up different charts and come up with different ideas of why things would work, but I've never used it myself. I don't know, but I don't know. I'm hopeful that we're moving towards something. And when I look at personality tests, be it the Briggs-Myers or the DISC test, I'm hopeful that we are beginning to find ways where we can measure the effectiveness of our relationship. And maybe that means measuring what's meaningful. I'm not sure how to do that, but I see it as a move towards a meaningful life. All of these tests or all of these ways we are trying to figure out what our strengths and weaknesses are can be used in a way that's meaningful. And that's what I'm hopeful for. I'm hopeful that this can be something that is a path towards meaningfulness, because I think that's ultimately what we should be working towards in groups settings or in business, is the meaningful path forward for all of us. And I think that's that should be more than profit. Should be, or maybe we could redefine profit into a meaningful relationship amongst us all, instead of it being more of a capital type of a thing. But I don't know, James, what do you think?
So decision making without compromising to the group is what you reminded me of. I think that's where it can come in handy in more of a corporate setting.
Yes.
To counter or be the antidote to groupthink dynamics of going along and compromising your own self. Because the groupthink is like, yeah, that sounds great. Being agreeable to someone because they have some position of authority or
Yes.
whatever. And internally in your heart, you're just like, no, that's a stupid idea. I don't want to do that. So you're having to compromise. So I think it has that ability because human design, if it's one thing, it's how you make your decisions. So if you said your sacral authority, that's people who make gut level decisions in the moment, like yes, no, very quick and decisive, you know. I happen to be emotional authority, which is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, which is like, I like to think that I can make quick, decisive decisions in the moment, but I'm the kind of person who needs to sleep on it. I need to kind of think about it for a while, and I might not ever get back to you. And I'm like, I don't, whatever. But in some sort of fast-paced setting or whatever, it's like if I have to make some quick decision and I compromise my own decision-making process just to be agreeable to someone, that's what I see get lost in group dynamics. So I live in Iowa. I live in a small town in Iowa. And I've really learned from the Quakers. They seem to have this process. I don't quite understand it, but where they come to a consensus. It's like a quorum, and they organize and create committees of coming up with a group consensus that doesn't compromise the individual, because they always give it space. They sit around in a circle. They don't talk a lot. They just kind of sit in silence and wait for things to come to them. And they don't reach a conclusion or a decision until everyone basically goes, that is fully in alignment with how I understand that and is truthful to me. It takes forever, but
I like it. I think
yeah,
it sounds
and with
good.
a fast-paced job workplace setting, it's like you can't
That's
really just
impossible.
sit in silence, and it's like you got to make decisions. But accelerating people's understanding of how they make decisions and honoring that, and not going forward unless it's so everyone's fully on board with it. I could see that being a good tool for you know, corporate settings and what that particular person is doing. So more power to them.
Yeah. Amazing. James, 2 hours just like that flew by. And I think we just kind of scratched the surface, man. I think we could probably talk a lot about, I think we could talk for a lot longer about a lot of other subjects. So you should come back on and we should have more conversations and maybe bring some more people in and kind of have a little more harmony to our voices.
I'd love to. I mean, it's really been enjoyable speaking with you. And before I was like, man, if we're going to talk about the truth of life and get into the depths of it, I kept thinking like the deeper I go and the more I try to get into the truth of life, the more it just catapults me and skyrockets me back to the surface again. You know, so it always does just kind of seem like grazing the surface. I'm like, we probably talked about some deep concepts and I learned a lot. And yeah, I'd love to chat with you again and network. And yeah, I love what you're doing. Truly, it's very inspiring.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And I too enjoyed the conversation, and I do. I love to try to get down to the nitty gritty and talk about everything on the surface. And they're all connected, man. It's really fun. And I've got to learn a lot, and I'm really thankful that you got to spend some time with me. But before I let you go, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Best way to get in touch with me about anything human design related, especially if it has to do with entrepreneurship, as far as integrating your human design and how it relates to creating a business that is resonant to you. I call it the antidote to generic coaching, because there's a lot of great coaching out there, but it's usually innocently gets you to follow their agenda as opposed to being yourself. So doing things that are designed for you and how you do them. You can go to humandesignroadmap.com/group to join my Facebook group. That's my main community where everybody collaborates. It's all people trying to figure out how to use human design to build their business. So I facilitate that. What I'm excited about. I've got a book coming out. It's called The Human Design Entrepreneur's Method. Yeah. I work with people individually with one-on-one guidance over 90 days to help them grow and scale their business using their human design chart as the primary guide. And then I'm putting together a self-paced course for people as well who like to do things more at their own pace. So I have that coming up pretty soon. But yeah, that Facebook group is the best way to get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the conversation today and you have questions, James is the guy to talk to. Go down to the show notes, check out his links down there, reach out to him. And if you're curious about human design, I would encourage you to investigate what he has got going on. Looking forward to the book coming out. Hang on briefly afterwards. I'll talk to you shortly. But everybody that hung out with us today, Clint, Free Spirit Human Capital, Clint Kyles, everybody else that chimed in here, and everybody that's listening on the podcast, thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And that's all we got. Aloha.